When the doors of the community music hall opened that evening, people entered slowly, chatting among themselves, carrying warm drinks, and looking forward to a relaxing night. It was a small event, something the neighborhood arranged every few months. Anyone could perform, sing, play an instrument, tell a story, whatever talent they wanted to share. Most people came to support friends or just enjoy a calm evening. No one expected anything extraordinary to happen. It was supposed to be a normal night, simple and predictable. Among the crowd walked a quiet young girl. She stayed close to her older brother, almost hiding behind him as they stepped inside. Her clothes were plain, nothing fancy, and her small bag hung loosely on her shoulder. She didn't look like someone confident enough to perform. In fact, at first glance, she didn't look like she had come to perform at all. Her brother placed a gentle hand on her back and whispered something that seemed to encourage her. She nodded slightly, though fear still covered her face. They went to the sign-up table where a volunteer sat with a clipboard. The volunteer looked at the girl, then at the brother, waiting for one of them to speak. The brother smiled politely and said the girl wanted to perform. The volunteer raised her eyebrows in surprise but didn't say anything. She wrote the girl's name, looked at her again, and simply said, "You're on the list." The girl gave a small smile but kept her head down. As she and her brother walked toward their seats, a few people who were nearby looked at her with puzzled expressions. No one said anything out loud, but their faces asked the same question: is she really performing? The hall slowly filled with chatter and laughter. Kids ran around between the rows of chairs, parents tried to keep them calm, and the performers held their instruments or rehearsed quietly. In the middle of all this noise, the girl sat silently beside her brother, her hands folded on her lap. She looked nervous, more nervous than anyone else in the room. Her brother leaned toward her and asked if she was okay. She nodded again, but her uneasy breathing told a different story. Eventually, the host walked onto the stage, tapped the microphone, and welcomed everyone to the event. The audience clapped lightly. The host explained how the night would go, read the list of performers, and added a few jokes that made people laugh. When the list was read, the girl heard her name. The moment it was spoken, the same soft whispers ran through the room again. People turned to look at her. Some looked curious, others confused, and a few looked doubtful. She could feel their eyes, and for a second her stomach tightened. She wanted to disappear into the chair. But her brother gave her a small nod, reminding her why they were there. The show began. One by one, performers went on stage. A teenager played the guitar. A middle-aged man sang an old song in a deep voice. A little boy played violin with shaky hands, and the audience clapped for him kindly. Everything moved smoothly, and the girl listened quietly, her heart beating faster as her turn came closer. Finally, after several performances, the host looked at the list again and announced the next performer. When he spoke the girl's name, his voice slowed down slightly, as if he wasn't sure he read it correctly. He glanced up to see who would stand. For a moment, the hall stayed silent. People turned their heads. They were expecting someone older, someone who looked like a musician. But then they saw the girl rising from her seat slowly, almost shyly, and stepping into the aisle. Several people blinked in surprise. A few whispered to each other, "That little girl is performing. Is she sure? Maybe she signed up by mistake." She heard the whispers, even though she tried not to react. She kept her eyes on the floor as she walked toward the stage. Her brother stayed seated but watched her with proud eyes. He didn't look worried at all. He believed in her even if the rest of the room didn't. The girl reached the front of the stage. The host leaned forward slightly and asked softly, "Are you sure you want to perform?" His tone wasn't rude, just careful, as if he didn't want her to feel embarrassed. If she changed her mind, she nodded. Her voice was too soft to answer with words. But her determination showed through her eyes. The host stepped aside and gestured toward the piano, standing under the warm lights. It wasn't a grand piano, just an upright one, old but well cared for. The girl took a slow breath and climbed the small steps to the stage. The hall, which had been lively and noisy just minutes earlier, began to quiet down. People weren't expecting much. Some thought she would play a few simple notes and leave. Some thought she'd freeze and walk off. Others simply waited politely, not wanting to judge her but unable to ignore how small and unsure she looked as she sat down on the piano bench. Her feet barely touched the floor. She adjusted the bench a little, just enough so she could reach the keys comfortably. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on her lap. She looked out at the audience for a brief moment. The lights were bright, making it hard to see individual faces, but she could feel their curiosity, their doubt, their silence. It wasn't a hostile silence. It was the kind of silence that people have when they don't know what to expect, when they think nothing special is going to happen. Her brother watched from the back, sitting upright now, his hands resting on his knees. He didn't need to encourage her anymore. She had arrived at the moment she had been dreaming about for so long. She faced the piano again. Her fingers hovered above the keys but didn't touch them yet. Her mind raced. She remembered practicing in her small room, the old keyboard her grandmother had brought home, the nights she spent copying melodies by ear because no one could afford lessons. She remembered the excitement she felt when she first realized she could play songs without anyone teaching her. She remembered dreaming of playing on a real stage. Even though the idea always felt too big, too impossible, now she was finally here. Sitting in front of a real piano, in front of real people, her heart beating louder than anything else. The hall waited. The audience leaned slightly forward. Even the children who had been restless earlier now sat still, sensing something important was about to happen. The girl breathed in deeply, her fingers finally lowering toward the keys. Her shoulders relaxed and the nervous tremble in her hands softened. For the first time since she entered the hall, she felt calm. Everyone around her watched, not knowing that the moment she touched the keys, their assumptions would change instantly. They had judged her by her appearance, her size, her silence. They believed she had no skill. But she knew the truth. Her brother knew the truth. And in a few seconds, when the first note filled the room, they would all know it too. And just before she played that first note, the hall was so silent that even the smallest sound could be heard. It was the kind of silence that comes right before something surprising, something unforgettable. It was the calm before a moment that would change everything for her. And for everyone who thought she couldn't play. The girl sat at the piano, but before she pressed the first key, her mind drifted back through the years that had brought her to this moment. It was strange how a single second on stage could open a door to memories she thought she had forgotten. The warm lights above the piano blurred for a moment, and everything around her grew softer, quieter. It was as if time slowed down just for her. She remembered the small room where she had grown up. The walls were old and the paint had faded in many places, but it was home. In one corner of that room stood a little keyboard, the very first instrument she ever touched. It wasn't new. It wasn't shiny. It had a few buttons that didn't work and some keys that stuck if she pressed them too hard. But it meant everything to her, because it came from someone who loved her deeply. Her grandmother had found that keyboard at a small market years ago. She didn't have much money, but when she saw the instrument, she instantly thought of her granddaughter. She believed the girl had something special inside her, something waiting to be discovered. So, even though the keyboard wasn't perfect, she bought it with the little savings she had. The girl remembered the day she received it, how her grandmother walked into the room with a smile, carrying the dusty instrument gently in her arms as if it were something priceless. The girl had been confused at first. She had never played an instrument before. She didn't know what to do with it. But her grandmother encouraged her to try. "Just listen," she had said. "Listen and follow your heart." Those words stayed with the girl even now, sitting on a real stage in front of strangers. Her grandmother's belief was the first spark that lit her journey, back then. The girl would sit for hours in front of the small keyboard, pressing random keys to hear what they sounded like. She didn't know anything about notes, scales, or chords. She simply experimented, trying to make sense of the sounds that filled the room. Sometimes she played softly so no one would hear if she made mistakes. Other times, when she got excited, she played loudly, forgetting the world around her. Her family never complained. They supported her silently. They couldn't afford music lessons or expensive instruments, but they gave her something more important. They gave her space to dream. She learned to play by listening. Whenever she heard a song on the radio that touched her heart, she would rush to her keyboard and try to repeat it. At first, she could only copy a few notes. She'd play them again and again until they sounded right. Then she'd try to add more pieces of the melody, fitting them together like a puzzle. Many nights she stayed awake long after everyone had gone to sleep, practicing with determination. There were days when she felt frustrated, days when the notes didn't sound right no matter how hard she tried. But she didn't stop. Slowly, something changed. Her fingers became more confident. Her ears grew sharper. She started creating her own small tunes, simple at first, then more developed as time passed. Every sound she made came from her heart, not from a book or a teacher. She had no guide except her own passion. Her grandmother used to sit by the door, listening quietly. She never judged, never corrected, never pressured. She simply enjoyed the music, even if it wasn't perfect. The girl remembered one evening when her grandmother placed her hand on her head and whispered, "One day your music will reach many people." At the time, the girl smiled shyly, not believing it fully. But now, sitting in the music hall with every eye on her, she realized how much her grandmother had seen in her. Her brother had also played a huge part in her journey. He wasn't a musician, but he was the one who encouraged her to perform publicly for the first time. He had watched her practice in their small room, day after day, year after year. He knew how talented she was, even when she didn't believe in herself. When he heard about the community performance night, he insisted she participate. At first, she refused. The idea of performing in front of people scared her. She felt too small, too inexperienced, too unsure. But her brother didn't give up. He reminded her of all the nights she had played with such passion and confidence when no one was watching. He told her the world deserved to hear her music. He didn't say it for praise or recognition. He said it because he believed in her genuinely. Finally, she gave in and agreed to come. But the moment she stepped into the hall, the doubts returned. She felt as if everyone could see her weakness. She felt judged even before touching the piano. The whispers she heard earlier, the confused looks, the doubtful expressions, all of it weighed heavily on her mind. Sitting on the bench now, she closed her eyes, letting the memories fade into the background. She didn't want fear to guide her. She wanted to remember why she came here. She reminded herself that she used to play not for approval, but for the love of music, for the peace it brought into her life. She wanted to share that same feeling tonight. As she inhaled slowly, she felt a sudden calm inside her. It was the same calm she used to feel when her grandmother sat beside her. It was the same comfort she felt when her brother stood by her side, telling her she could do this. For a moment she forgot the audience, the lights, the doubts. She focused only on the piano in front of her, the real piano she had dreamed of playing for so long. She gently placed her fingers on the cool keys. They felt different from her old keyboard. These keys were smooth and heavy, responding to every touch. She took a moment to appreciate that feeling. It was new. It was special. It was something she had worked years to experience. The audience watched her closely, still unsure of what she was about to do. Some leaned back casually, expecting a short, simple tune. Others leaned forward, curious but doubtful. A few children whispered quietly to their parents, asking if she was scared. The parents smiled softly, saying they weren't sure, but the girl wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about those years of practice, of trying and failing, of pushing herself even when no one was watching. She thought about how many times she had dreamed of playing in a hall like this, even if it was small. She thought about how she had always wanted to share her music with people, to make them feel something even if it was just for a moment. She remembered the first time she played a melody that made her grandmother tear up. She remembered how her brother stood at her door, listening with a smile. She remembered how music helped her through lonely days, stressful days, days when she felt invisible. The piano had always been there for her, even when nothing else felt certain. The sound of a chair shifting in the hall snapped her back into the present. She opened her eyes again. The room looked different now. The lights didn't seem too bright anymore. The people didn't look intimidating. The stage didn't feel big. Everything felt right. Everything felt possible. She straightened her back and took another quiet breath. Her fingers rested firmly on the keys, no longer trembling. Her heart beat steadily, not from fear now, but from anticipation. She was ready to show the world a part of herself she had kept hidden for so long. Ready to prove to herself that she was capable. Ready to honor the people who believed in her when no one else did. She knew she wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to express something simple, honest, and pure. And she hoped that when the audience heard the first note, they would feel that truth too. As she pressed the first key, everything inside her aligned: the past, the present, the memories, the dreams. And what happened in the next few seconds would change the way everyone in that hall saw her forever. The very first note that came from the piano was soft, gentle, and clear. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't try to grab attention forcefully. Instead, it felt like a quiet whisper, yet that whisper carried something powerful enough to make everyone in the room turn still. People who had been leaning back in their chairs suddenly straightened. Those who had been whispering to each other stopped mid-sentence. Even the children who had been restless earlier slowly turned toward the stage, sensing that something unusual was happening. It was as if the sound reached every corner of the hall and wrapped itself around the audience. Urging them to listen carefully, the girl's fingers moved from one key to another with confidence that no one expected. Her shoulders relaxed, and the tense expression she wore earlier faded away. She was no longer a nervous child sitting on a stage. She had become part of the music. Every movement, every note, every small shift in her posture showed a deep connection with the piano. The melody she played wasn't something people recognized from the radio or a famous song. It wasn't a piece that could be easily named. It was her own creation, something she had shaped slowly over the years, practicing late at night when everyone slept. It was a melody filled with her memories, emotions, and dreams. At first, the tune was soft and smooth, like a story slowly beginning. The notes flowed gently, like calm waves touching the shore. The audience felt that softness. They didn't know why, but it touched them deeply. There was something honest about it, something pure and heartfelt. Then, gradually, the melody changed. It grew stronger, richer, and more expressive. Her fingers moved faster, gliding from one end of the piano to the other with ease. The room felt her confidence, her strength, and the passion she had kept hidden for so long. People exchanged glances, but no one dared speak. Their expressions shifted from confusion to surprise and finally to amazement. They couldn't believe that the same quiet girl who walked nervously toward the stage earlier was now creating music that felt like it belonged to a professional performer. The host, who had doubted whether she even wanted to play, stood frozen at the side of the stage. He stared at her hands, watching how effortlessly she controlled the keys. He had seen many performers before, some talented, some still learning, but he had never seen someone so young play with such emotion and natural skill. In the back of the hall, her brother sat completely still. His eyes didn't blink for several seconds at a time. He had heard her play many times at home, but somehow this felt different. Hearing her on a real piano, in a real hall, in front of so many people, it made her talent shine even more. He couldn't help the small smile that formed on his face, a smile filled with pride, love, and relief. All the times he had encouraged her, all the moments she doubted herself. Now he was seeing the truth come alive on stage. As the melody continued, the atmosphere in the hall grew intense. Each note seemed to carry a different emotion: joy, sorrow, hope, longing. It was as if her entire life story was being told through sound. The room felt connected to her, even though they didn't know anything about her background. They didn't know how she learned to play without a teacher, or how she practiced in a small room with a broken keyboard. They didn't know how many nights she had spent perfecting her craft. But they felt it. They felt every hour she had put into her music. Her performance wasn't just skillful, it was emotional. It reached people in a way that words couldn't. Some audience members found themselves leaning forward without realizing it. Others felt chills rising on their arms. A few even felt their eyes begin to water, though they tried to hide it. The girl seemed lost in her own world as she played. She didn't look at the audience. She didn't look nervous anymore. She simply focused on the keys, letting her fingers move naturally, as if the piano had been waiting for her all along. Every sound she produced seemed to grow from her heart rather than her hands. There came a moment when the music slowed again. The notes softened, becoming gentle and almost fragile. It was the kind of softness that makes a room lean in closer. The girl felt something inside her shift, something deep and meaningful. This part of the melody reminded her of her grandmother, the woman who had given her the first keyboard she ever touched. The sweetness of that memory filled her chest, and without thinking, she let it guide her fingers. The hall sensed this change. They didn't know the story behind it, but they felt the emotion. It was warm, tender, full of love and longing. Many listeners found themselves holding their breath, fearing that even breathing too loudly might break the magic. Slowly, the music rose again. The gentle notes transformed into stronger ones. The melody carried a sense of determination now. It told a story of someone who refused to give up, someone who tried again and again even when no one believed in her. The girl's hands moved smoothly, confidently, every motion expressing the silent struggle she had grown through. The audience was mesmerized. They weren't just listening, they were experiencing the music. They were traveling through her emotions, step by step, without needing to know her personally. Her music connected everyone in the room in a way that felt almost unreal. At one point, a small gasp came from someone in the front row. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to show how deeply the music had touched them. Normally, a sound like that might distract a performer, but the girl didn't even notice. She was too focused, too absorbed, too connected to the piano. Her fingers moved faster now. The melody grew brighter, hopeful, almost triumphant. It felt like standing at the top of a hill after a long climb. It felt like winning something after years of trying. It felt like breaking free from doubt. The room reflected that feeling. The people's expressions softened, their eyes brightened, their bodies leaned forward. Everyone felt the rise in energy. Everyone felt the strength in her music. It was as if the girl was telling them, "This is who I really am." As the performance neared its end, the girl slowed the melody again. This time the music sounded peaceful, calm, satisfied. It was like the quiet after a storm. The moment when everything feels still and complete. Her hands moved gently across the keys, letting the last few notes linger in the air. Those notes floated around the room like tiny sparks of light, settling softly in each person's heart. Then, with one final touch, she ended the piece. Silence filled the hall. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from boredom or confusion. It was the silence that comes from awe when something beautiful leaves people speechless. The audience sat frozen, their eyes fixed on the girl, their minds still trapped in the world her music had created. She lifted her hands from the keys and slowly looked up. Her chest rose and fell from deep breaths, but her face stayed calm. For a moment, she worried that the silence meant they didn't like her performance. She almost pulled her hands back nervously. Then it happened. A single person began to clap. Then another. Then the entire hall erupted into applause, loud, overwhelming, heartfelt applause that echoed off every wall. People stood from their seats as if something inside them had pushed them upward. They clapped so loudly that the girl flinched in surprise. Some even cheered. Others placed their hands over their hearts, touched by the emotion she had shared. The girl's eyes widened. She had never imagined a reaction like this. She didn't know what to do. She looked toward her brother, and he stood proudly, clapping harder than anyone. His smile stretched wide across his face, and for a moment she felt like crying, not from sadness, but from pure joy. The audience kept clapping, some wiping their eyes, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. No one had expected this. No one had believed she could play. But in a few minutes, she had changed all of that. Her music had silenced doubt. Her talent had spoken louder than anyone's assumptions, and this was only the beginning. When the girl finished playing, the last note hung in the air like a soft echo. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the whole hall was frozen, still caught in the beauty of the melody she had created. She sat there quietly, her fingers still. resting lightly on the keys, unsure of what to expect. Her heart beat quickly, and she swallowed hard, afraid that maybe the silence meant they didn't like what she played, but then everything changed. Man in the second row stood up and began to clap. His hands hit together loudly, breaking the silence like a spark. Then a woman a few seats away rose to her feet and joined him, and within seconds the entire hall exploded into applause. People stood up all around her, cheering, clapping, smiling, some even letting out little gasps of disbelief at what they had just heard. The girl blinked, stunned. She hadn't expected anything like this. She had imagined polite clapping, maybe some small smiles. But this full standing ovation felt unreal. For a moment, she didn't know where to look or what to do. Her hands trembled slightly, and she instinctively pulled them into her lap. Overwhelmed by the sound and the attention, the applause didn't stop. It only grew louder. It filled the entire hall until it felt like the room itself was shaking with appreciation. Some people covered their mouths, still amazed. Others whispered to each other, saying things like, "How did she play like that? And where did she learn? And she's unbelievable." But the girl couldn't hear any of that clearly. All she heard was the roar of applause and her own heartbeat. Her eyes searched the hall until they landed on her brother. He was already standing, clapping harder than anyone else, his smile full of pride. When he caught her eye, he nodded slowly, a look that said, "See? I told you." She felt warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had spent so many years doubting herself, imagining she wasn't ready or that she wasn't good enough. And now, looking at this crowd celebrating her, she felt something shift inside her, a realization that she had been holding herself back without reason. The host walked up to the stage, clapping as he approached. His face showed complete shock, but in the best possible way. When he reached the microphone, he waited a moment for the applause to soften, but it didn't. The audience kept going, forcing him to wait a little more. Finally, when the clapping became gentle enough for him to speak, he leaned toward the microphone. "I think we can all agree," he said, still sounding breathless, "that what we just heard was something truly special." The audience clapped again, cheering loudly. The girl lowered her gaze shyly, her cheeks warm with embarrassment and joy. The host turned to her. "I don't think any of us expected this," he said with a smile. "You have a gift. A real, beautiful gift." She swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. Her voice felt trapped somewhere inside her, too small to push through the noise of her emotions. He didn't force her to speak. Instead, he stepped aside and gestured for her to take a small bow. She hesitated at first, but then she stood up from the bench, her legs slightly shaky. She faced the audience, who began to clap louder as she slowly bowed her head. It wasn't a deep bow, just a small, shy one, but it carried so much sincerity that it made the applause grow even more. After she bowed, she stepped off the stage carefully. As she walked down the steps, several people reached out to her, touching her arm gently or giving her encouraging smiles. She didn't know what to say. She only nodded softly and whispered thank you whenever she could. Her brother reached her first. He wrapped one arm around her shoulders in a careful, warm hug, not wanting to overwhelm her. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." She leaned into him, feeling safe, relieved, and incredibly happy. "I didn't think they would like it," she whispered back. He shook his head. "They didn't just like it, they loved it." As they turned to leave the area near the stage, they were stopped by a woman with a soft smile and a kind expression. She introduced herself as someone who worked with young musicians. She explained that she had been teaching piano for years and had never seen such raw, natural talent at such a young age. "Your performance was extraordinary," she said gently. "Would you be interested in taking formal lessons? I would love to teach you. And don't worry about fees. I can offer them to you for free." The girl's eyes widened. She stared at the woman, unsure if she heard correctly. Free lessons? Real lessons? She had dreamed of that for so long, but never believed it could happen. Her brother looked just as surprised, but he nodded quickly. "That would mean so much," he said softly. The woman smiled warmly. "It would mean a lot to me, too. I haven't come across a talent like yours in years." The girl felt her throat tighten with emotion. She managed to whisper a quiet thank you, feeling grateful in a way she couldn't express fully. As more people came forward, some just to congratulate her and others to tell her how deeply her music touched them, the girl slowly realized something important. All her life, she had played secretly, quietly, unsure if she deserved to be heard. She had always thought her music was just a small thing, something only she enjoyed. But tonight proved that her gift wasn't small at all. It had the power to move people, to silence a room, to bring strangers together. The night continued as other performers took their turns, but everyone kept whispering about the girl at the piano. They talked about her soft beginning, her strong middle, her emotional ending. They talked about the way she sat, the way her hands moved, the way her music made them feel. Even as the event went on, her performance stayed fresh in their minds. She and her brother sat back in their seats. He looked at her with such pride that she couldn't help but smile. She hugged her knees close to her chest, trying to quiet the excitement inside her. It still felt unreal. After the event ended, people slowly left the hall. Some of them stopped by the girl one last time to congratulate her or give her a smile. A few children told her they wanted to learn piano too after hearing her play. Their parents nodded, saying they had never seen their kids so inspired. The girl listened to them quietly, feeling something warm grow inside her. She hadn't expected to inspire anyone. She just wanted to share her music, nothing more. But now she understood that her music had a way of reaching people's hearts, and that was something incredibly special. As she and her brother walked outside, the cool night air greeted them. The sky was dark, but the stars were bright, tiny lights scattered across the quiet sky. She looked up at them with a smile she couldn't hide. She felt lighter, almost as if she were floating. Her brother nudged her gently. "Proud of yourself?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "A little," she whispered. "Good," he said. "Because you should be." They began walking home, their steps quiet on the empty street. The girl kept replaying. The moment she played the first note, the moment the audience stood, the moment the teacher offered her lessons. She knew life wouldn't suddenly become perfect overnight. But she also knew something important had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't doubting herself anymore. She wasn't hiding her music anymore. The world had finally heard her. And they loved what they heard. As she walked, she imagined her grandmother smiling somewhere, proud of the little girl who once sat alone in a tiny room, pressing old keys and dreaming of a moment just like this. She imagined her brother remembering this night for years. She imagined herself sitting at a better piano someday, performing for an even larger audience. The possibilities felt endless. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. The night felt different, brighter, hopeful. This was just the beginning. Her story had only started tonight. And with every step she took toward home, she carried the sound of applause in her heart, a reminder that sometimes, even when no one believes in you, one brave moment can change everything.